Hey all, Taves here, Backstage Zimba Planet Zoo, and welcome back to my African themed zoo, Zimba Zoo. We are continuing the northern desert section of this zoo, building on from the porcupine habitat we added in the last episode. This is continuing to use the animals from the Arid Animal Pack, the recent DLC, the most recent DLC that Frontier released. So this is continuing the same area. It's got a sort of fairly similar vibe. It's this new little kind of rocky desert section, very similar to in style and approach really to the porcupine. So still using these kind of animals that can be found amongst the rocks. I have to say I'm a big fan, and I've always been a big fan, and if you've seen much of my other stuff, you'll have seen that I am a big fan of the smaller animals in Planet Zoo. And I think they just kind of let you get these little cosy nooks and crannies into your habitats. And we did a lot of that in the porcupine habitat, and we're continuing that today. So this habitat is going to be split actually, because they're quite solitary animals, sandcat. So doing some reading before I started the build, and yeah, they don't tend to be, it's not like they're territorial, but they don't tend to hang around in big groups, and that's a bit of a shame, because one of the things that the game kind of limits you on is just the like interactivity of the animals sometimes. So like seeing them in interacting with enrichment items and stuff tends to always mean that you kind of want to have more animals in there than you're supposed to. But we're kind of trying to get around that by having two separate parts of the habitat. So you're going to see me build one of these this episode. And this is a bit of a shorter episode this week. So there's going to be a whole section more of this that's going to be building on from the backstage areas of the habitat through to the sort of secondary habitat section for additional sandcats, an additional kind of pair of sandcats in another section. So yeah, this is going to have, one of the things I really wanted to get in this section was really have like lots of little cute little viewing sections. So little places that you could kind of peep through as a guest and see the animals doing their thing, and having the animals do like lots of different stuff. So there's quite a few different places where you experience the animal in this habitat. Quite a few little kind of almost like surprises, like this is a little hole that you can look through and see see the animals climbing down a climbing frame, which you'll see in a second. And so there's loads of details as usual, lots of little different viewing areas and shady sections and sitting down areas and that sort of thing. So this is, as I said, putting some glass in, trying to make it this kind of look like it's like it's kind of sealed. One of the big things that I was playing around with while I was building this habitat was that they're like a mostly nocturnal animal. You do see them in zoos, obviously, and they obviously manage that in some way within the zoo so that you don't have to just have them hidden away inside. So I sort of decided not to worry too much about the nocturnal nature of the animal, but did actually end up giving them quite a few internal spaces where you can view them. And if you remember from the last episode, I think I showed you this section, it's all really like windy round little sections of paths. So here you see this tiny little narrow habitat that I'm building. And it was a bit of a challenge really, just deliberately just to kind of see how much I could stretch this habitat into sort of something interesting and novel whilst using as much of this tiny little bit of space as I possibly could. So here you see me, for example, creating this little walkover, and then this took me ages actually, like tunneling out a little section underneath that will eventually end up becoming like a little kind of cave for them to hang out. So you get two or three different ways of viewing the same section here. So you can see them in their little cave eventually, and then you'll see them walking across that kind of overpass thing. And it's a bit of a trick using the the terrain brush, the shape cutting tool in the terrain tools that we've got to kind of get that tiny little thin bit of terrain which they'll walk across quite happily, and then keeping it all fairly condensed and using the faux rocks and stuff to make it look like it's real, but it's not too real. It's all fairly kind of man-made and prefabricated and that sort of thing. And so they end up with this little kind of enclosed section down the bottom that you can view them in, and they can sleep in, and then they can walk across the top. And that turned out really well, actually. It took me, as I said, quite a long time, because when you got that tiny little bit of terrain, any kind of like push or pull or level out that you use on the terrain brush will just completely break that. So you can see it starting to come together. I've got a few problems. I'm actually having a problem. I have to let you guys know this, actually, because hopefully someone will be able to help me in the comments section. So a while ago, I decided to start using the free build mod, and it's the only mod that I've used, and I've been really reluctant about using any mods for a long time. But it is so good. It's so useful to use. But the problem I'm having since the last update is that my gizmo is missing one of its little options. If you see there on the gizmo, one of the little options that like resets the rotation is missing, and I don't know how to fix it, and there doesn't seem to be an update to the mod that I've got. So if anybody in the comments knows how to fix that, I would really appreciate you letting me know so I can fix it. So there's that. As I said, there's the little kind of underground burrow section, and now here's the main area of their habitat. I mean, I guess it's the main area. I guess there's not really a particularly big area of any of this. And again, another challenge. I feel like this was a bit of a glutton for punishment, trying to squeeze it into this tiny area. But another challenge is obviously that these are really good climbers. So I didn't really want to cover the whole thing over in net, because I don't like the shadows that you get with net. So it was really difficult. And you'll see a little trick that I use later on, just to like imply these kind of limited climbing spaces. So we're on the other side of the habitat now, and you can see I'm trying to get a viewing section that would allow guests on this side of the path to have a view of the animals using that kind of overpass over the top of the cave that we've just created. And again, just like trying to have lots of little interesting views that allow the guests to see into the animal habitat, but not to see other guests, because I think that's always a kind of important little trick to use. So you can see it's starting to come together now. We have this little layer inside that animals can pass over the top of. They climb up those sticks and they can go across that bit of terrain, but that bit of terrain is also the top side of the cave that you can view into. So that meant we have a custom roof. And someone asked me a little while ago, actually, in the comments section about how you build custom roofs. And it's a painful process, but this is what you're seeing me do here. Really, like, the art shapes are a really good tool to use. They kind of give you the flexibility to be able to bend and shape and come up with the kind of novel custom shapes. The best piece of advice I can say for anyone trying to build their own custom roof is try and have the wall pieces conform to some sort of grid shape. So it doesn't matter if you're not using the grid pieces, but if you are making a custom roof, try not to end up doing what I'm doing here. So the more unusual you make your wall configuration, so every time you make your walls not square, the roof is going to be a pain. And you can see that here. I'm really starting to struggle to pull this together. It does come together eventually, but it takes a lot of patience. If you've got the patience for this, it really works and it can pay off, and you'll see me kind of hopefully bring it all together. But that's the best thing I would say, is try and at least use kind of square walls rather than what I had, which was like rhombus not parallel walls. Here's the bit where I start to realize, okay, well, these guys are going to be able to easily just jump up on the top of this wall, climb over the top of it, and escape. That was what this was. This was my attempt to make sure that the animals stay down inside there. So, and this was all about really having, as I said at the beginning, all about having them have the guests have different viewpoints. So you can see the animals, you can look down on the animals, you can be at eye level with the animals. but yeah, it's all kind of happening in this really cozy little enclosed space. I'm using these mud walls. I think these are actually taken straight from Caesar Creates workshop asset, but I have bent them and shaped them a little bit. If you don't know who Caesar is, he's like, yeah, really, really the master of these kind of mud pieces, and does some really great like realistic builds and things. So go check him out. But yeah, so started to use those mud assets, and I haven't done a lot of that with the mud, actually. Those are actually the stalactite pieces, and they do have a really good kind of mud texture. Mostly it's about getting the colour right, I would say, in this. And if you blend it in with the faux rock, it actually works out quite well. I'm trying to make sure that when I use those pieces that I don't, it's supposed to be that that's obviously fake. So I personally prefer it where you can still see a wall. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm making sure that you can still see the wall over the top of those faux mud pieces, that faux mud wall. I think it actually kind of helps the realism for me. And given a bit of decorating and a bit of detailing with some foliage and things, I think really brings it all together. So this mound that you're seeing me kind of create the wall behind is actually one of the animal burrows. So sandcats are really good. Sandcats are really fascinating creatures, as is always the case with Planet Zoo. I'm not someone that's particularly massively obsessive about animals, but you learn some really interesting things playing this game, which is I guess one of the cool benefits of it. I'm a builder really, that's what brings me to the game. It's the creativity, but you do learn some cool things about animals, and they are fascinating little cool animals. Very small, obviously very cute, but fairly ferocious and kind of hardy. They can survive in the deserts. They're the only animal that actually lives kind of entirely in the desert. Only cats that will live entirely in the desert. Other cats will pass through the desert, but they are quite well adapted to survive in the desert. They can kind of regulate their temperature really well because they've got little thick fur and stuff, and they can go without water for ages, all that sort of thing. And they do tend to hang around these more kind of rocky areas of the desert where there are scrubs and stuff. So you will find them in the Sahara, which is mostly what we're kind of shooting for here. But yeah, really just cool little animals, super sensitive hearing, all that sort of thing that you'd expect, and just naturally adapted to their surroundings. So yeah, again, you'll see me this is all about layering in this habitat. I really enjoyed it because it was all about these kind of different layers. So we've got that plank leading up to the climbing section. You'll see this in the end there, where we've got some cinematics just so you can see the animals moving around inside and over the climbing sections and things. I have to say, I struggled to get them to do all of the animations that I wanted them to do. So I don't know if this is the thing that everybody else has, or maybe this is part of the product of me being in a really small space. Was that they don't interact with the enrichment items very much. I don't know if that's partly because I'd had them in the habitat for a while. What I tend to do is put the animals in the habitat fairly early so that I can see them in their space and then build around them. So because there's a good point. It's to get scale and that sort of thing. I like my habitats to be quite cozy and small. So I tend to add the animals in really early on so that I can scale everything based off the animal. And if I need to give them more space, then I will do. Here's an interesting bit. So this was actually an implied. So the other side of this those little box sections you see there, those little open squares, will be another sandcat habitat, which I'll probably will build off camera and not record, and you'll see it just in the next episode. But yeah, I thought I'd just do this, and I'd give them the ability to be able to kind of go, well, we could actually have multiple pairs. We could have 2 breeding pairs of sandcats in this zoo. And then I decided to put them the little climbing frame. As I said, they don't use this stuff very often. I did manage to catch them doing some of their animations, and you'll see that it's a little bit janky as the climbing always is, but they're very cool and they're very cute. So yeah, they've just got this like section has just got this little climbing frame and the rubbing pad and the burrow. I have to say they spend probably more time in the burrow than I would like. But yeah, they're just a really cool animal, and I think they're a really great addition to Zimba because again, they kind of go along with the fact that we've got like fennec foxes and we've got porcupines and we're going to have aardvarks and that sort of thing soon as well. And yeah, little cozy spaces. I played around here with the idea of just this like implied. I ended up changing that because I felt the wheels were too big. An implied system for kind of opening and closing that little hatch there in case you wanted to let them in and out of the other area. Something I try and do quite a lot is think through how these different spaces would be used, and if you wanted to get animals like restricted into a different section, you could. A bit more of that fencing over the top, that railing system, just to kind of make sure again that they weren't places that the animals could jump out, because obviously I don't want that. And then lastly, you haven't really seen me do this very much, but this is a little section along the path here, opposite where the sandcats are actually, that has. I decided to build a couple of my own little exhibits boxes. So there is using one of Drax's, a couple of Drax's prop pieces. So like animals. There's I think I've got like a crab in there and a couple of fish. So just as a bit of a backdrop, you'll see that you won't actually see this very much in this episode, but I think the next episode will do a bit more of a tour. In fact, maybe even the episode after that. When we tour this section, you'll see how this kind of works. So this is me making up my own exhibit boxes, and then this is the kind of backstage view of them. So this is me implying how you'd get into the back of that box. And in fact, here we are inside one of the exhibit boxes, creating our own exhibit box. Because if you've played Planet Zoo, it's one of I love the game so much, but I wish the exhibit boxes were different sizes. Because this sort of thing, yeah, I end up having to create my own. You saw the little crab one there for a second. So yeah, what I've done here is this is a fish. This is going to have fish in it. You can see I've dropped the fish in, and I'm now I had tried to make it so that like that's the view that you get of the fish. But if you're a keeper, how do you get to the fish? You get to the fish from behind, and the guests can't see you interacting with the fish and going in and out of the tank and that sort of thing. And this is all covered over, and this is all behind one of those faux mud walls. So yeah, you'll see more of this when we do the next episode. As I said, all of the backstage area will be done, and you'll see me fill in some of these other spaces. I think there's going to be aardvarks in the next one, potentially something else as well. So the little shading section, just again to add some detail, because obviously this is Africa, it's very hot, so adding this little shady section. We're going to stick around for a few little cinematics right at the end, but yeah, and I think if there's anything you kind of want me to upload onto the workshop, I did have a request in the last episode actually to upload the habitat. Really difficult to do, I'm afraid, guys, just because of the custom terrain and stuff that I've done for this. So you'll kind of have to wait, I'm afraid, for the whole zoo to get uploaded. So here we go. Here's the kitties climbing through the section. And as I said, I will be back hopefully fairly soon. I've kept this episode fairly short so that I can hopefully get a couple more out fairly soon. Apologies for me being a bit tardy as ever with the episodes. But thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your patience. Here we go. Oh, we will actually see them jump up onto this. We see a couple of little animations here. So if you look very carefully, you'll see them kind of hanging out together here. They look like a little gang. I think that's Mama and the two kittens. And then there's the rubbing pad. Using the rubbing pad, it finally managed to get that. Bravely jumping across and pushing this down. You can see the guests all kind of looking on, impressed in the background. Slightly clanky climbing animation to get down. And then he just exhausts himself and he has to go off to sleep. So he takes himself back into the habitat for a little doze. Thank you very much for watching. Catch you guys on the next one. Take it easy.